Hey, glory to Jesus Christ. Glory forever. This is Father Anthony Perkins, and this is my Fool Head. Good to be with y'all this morning. In my world, it's 8 o'clock in the morning on December 11th. Not sure when it is in yours, but whenever and wherever it is, I hope it's going well. I'm here in Hartwell, Georgia, and it's a foggy morning. So I can just see the lake down through the woods off the back deck over there. Yeah, nice. Not too cold. It's about 55, 60 degrees. That's kind of nice. And it's quiet. The kids aren't up yet. Bonnie's already left for work. So I'm enjoying some coffee and some time with you. So, cheers. This is exam time for me at the University of Georgia, and I'm towards the end of it now. So, had to write several papers and take a couple of, exams, like multiple choice kind of stuff. Yeah, they still do that in graduate school still sometimes. And I got one more paper, and it's one of those experience things. So the teacher gave us an envelope with the questions in it, and we open it up, and we email him saying, I've opened up the envelope, and then your 24-hour clock starts. So you have 24 hours to write those answers. And, I'm in school. My cohort, so to speak, is, they're in their 20s. And I bet you, they're going to use most of that 24 hours. I reckon I'll probably use about 6 or 8 of them because, life doesn't change just because you got an exam. Deacon Adrian Mazur, Slava Naviki. How are you, brother? I hope everything's well up there in New York City. I'll be up your way soon. I get to come up to South Bound Brook next week for the end of semester residency for the distance learners. And yeah, it's going to be good. Haven't been up there in a while. Looking forward to it. For those that don't know, so our seminary is in South Bound Brook, which is about an hour away from New York City. And Deacon Adrian is a hospital chaplain in New York, maybe Long Island. It's all one big blob to me. And his father's a priest there in New York City. And he's a deacon there. And Adrian was one of my students. Oh my goodness. And Adrian just said he got COVID for the second time. Hey, you get a vacation out of it though. Which will drive him crazy, by the way. If he's not doing something, helping people, he don't know what to do. So the first time he got it, he had it for like, a week, and he got it, he's young, and he played soccer in college, and still really fit. And so he went and ran like something ridiculous. How far did you run, Adrian, when you thought you were finally over COVID? And if you want to get to know Adrian, I did he did an interview with me, and that was very touching. You can see that in the live stream. He was in the COVID set. God bless you, Deacon. I hope you don't have many symptoms. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he was one of my students in seminary, and it was awesome. Loved it. So I hope everybody's doing well. We're in the middle of not just finals time, but the Nativity Lent, and I've got some catechumen who are doing this for the first time. Yeah, okay, so Deacon Adrian, yeah, that's what I thought it was. He ran 26.2 miles to show that he was recovered from COVID and that COVID could have no hold over him. And right now he has no symptoms. Well, that's the best way to be sick, right? So I'm sure you can't go to work. So no symptoms, not allowed to go to work. That's all right. This is the humor. So yeah. So I hope your Lenting is going well. Pray for our catechumens. Right? Anytime you make a spiritual advancement, it comes with extra temptations and extra attacks. Yeah, we can say that. And those attacks, it's interesting the way they work, right? So some people they have this black and white worldview where everything negative is coming from demons and everything positive is coming from grace, the Lord, and that's certainly part of our cosmology. But there are it's more complicated than that, and that's what I was trying to get across to you a couple of weeks ago when I was talking to you about whether or not all of the fairies and aliens were demons, right? And no, they're not. I mean, all the spiritual beings that present themselves as aliens and fairies, those may be. But there's a whole other category of misfiring, just like there is with temptation, that we've got, this, what some psychologists call the ego. We've got part of our mind that is resistant to change. And especially when it's trying to move us away from an ego-centered way of living, a pride-centered way of living, is the way that we'd put it in Orthodoxy, towards a way that's more consistent with, Christ, with a healthy mind. So there's going to be resistance anytime you try to make change. And like if you're in a parish and you're like, we've been stuck in a rut for a while, I can see that there's a better way to do things. And so, even if you're good at it and you make kind of slow adjustments, or maybe you're really good at it and you can make quick ones, there's going to be a trough. You're going along at this level that you can do better. But it's going to take change. Well, the change, you don't just add energy and move it up, right? That's not the way that all change works. Some changes, you start to make it, and boom, things get harder for a while, and then the energy comes in, right? And in a system like a parish, it's because people are involved. And even if you can get everyone on board with the vision of the future, when you start actually doing it, you start messing with people's lives, right? And you can turn this into black and white terms and saying that you're resistant to grace and all this kind of stuff. And I've seen pastors do this. It's incredibly unhealthy. Why not just treat them as people trying to do the best they can and then help them adjust, right? Because it does take adjustment anytime you're trying to move from one state to another. And it's true with our mind as well. So when we are trying to make changes in our life, sometimes it gets harder. So when you say, I am, for most of these people, rededicating myself to Christ, and I believe that Holy Orthodoxy is the fullness, and I am submitting myself to it. I'm going to allow God to work with me in Holy Orthodoxy so I can become His child. I can become as holy as, not as holy, so I can become holy as He is holy and grow, right? Once you make that commitment, part of your mind is going to be like, I kind of like what we're doing, kind of comfortable, right? I kind of, you sure there's something wrong with pornography? You sure there's, and, your intellect says, yes, I know there's stuff wrong, but your mind, it's going to do it's like an insurgency. It's going to run against you, right? So we've got all these doomkies, these little thoughts, these logoi, right? Little thoughts. That's just two different languages saying the same thing, little thoughts. And they organize in a conspiracy and an insurgency against change, right? In defense of the status quo. They double down. So one of the things that catechumen do is that they build these new habits of prayer, these new habits of accountability, and then part of it, as Westerners, we get stuck on, well, I'm learning things as a catechumen. I'm learning more about doctrine. I'm learning more about dogma, how the church service work, why they work, all that kinds of stuff. I'm learning more things so I can understand God better and deepen my relationship with Him. Yeah, that's part of it. But that's not sustainable unless you have the habits. And the neat thing about orthodoxy is the habits and the theology are together, right? They express the same thing. And one way of thinking of it is that the habits reinforce the theology, right? That's kind of a Western way to think of it, and I'll buy it, right? But another way is they're part of the same orthodoxy. And if you try to do one without the other, you're going to be unbalanced. If you try to do the head knowledge, which is what many people try to do, they increase the head knowledge, and then they get in, and this insurgency runs during the catechumency, after the chrismation baptism. And then the buyer's remorse comes in, the second thoughts and all this kind of stuff, And let me compare this to a honeymoon. Okay, so you've got a couple, they're really in love. Nowadays, this doesn't work as well because people, they're doing it the hard way. They're living together for a long time, and then they get married as if, we're testing it out. No, come on, stop it. Anyways, in the story I'm creating, as they fall in love and they court each other, and then they decide to get married, and it's beautiful. And even if they've done it the hard way, the blush of the wedding, all this energy and this emotion. And when you're in this stage of love with somebody, you often are willing to overlook things, right? Because you're making a huge change in your life. And, we've talked about the 3-part division of the mind, right? Your gut, your emotions are saying, yeah, it's going to be great. This is fantastic. And your mind's along for the ride. So it's saying, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, everything's good. Everything's good. Well, what happens then is you go out of that honeymoon period, and this level of, man, it's great, provided by your gut, is going to decrease, right? Back to normal levels. You're actually living with a human being, and you remain a human being with flaws. And so you find out, oh, whoa, man, right? And, the wandering eye, maybe I picked the wrong person, this kind of stuff starts kicking in. Well, the thing that if you're doing marriage well is during that time when, the tolerance levels are high, right? The patience levels are high because of this extra level of emotion. You build in the habits. You build in the habits of a life together, right? And these work with I'll call it the theology of relationship. What people miss is they sometimes think that love is just the gut thing. So when it goes down, of course, a relationship is very difficult to sustain. But when you see it as, something that is ontological, it's real, it's something new is created, a one-fleshedness that needs to be supported, that needs to be served, then you build up the habits of communication, of mutual forgiveness, going to church together, praying together, eating together, sharing dreams, sharing disappointments, just this normal kind of stuff. And honesty. Not the people-pleasing kind of thing where you're hiding a portion of yourself because you're so scared that it'll be rejected. None of that, right? You bring this out and you communicate and you do it well. And then when that emotional level goes down, it doesn't matter. You're together, and it's not just that you can't imagine any other way. People would say, oh, what you've done is you've just brainwashed yourself or something. No. You're participating in something that is transformational. And it's got to be all in. It's got to be all in. This is why it's so important to not to be unequally yoked. Make sure during that courting process that you've married the right person. Some of you listening, that didn't go so well, right? And so once that emotion decreased, you're like, oh man, I married a crazy person, right? This is why you should always talk to your parents. Should I marry them? This is a joke that we have in our house with my kids. I'm joking, not joking, right? This is what we're doing with as catechumens, because I speak not of marriage, but of the church, as says St. Paul, right? So for catechumen, yeah, they're learning stuff about their new partner, right? The church. And they are looking forward to a life where they are embedded within that life of the church, where it's a shared life, where you can't imagine any other way. Okay? And there's a lot of excitement. And I love working with inquirers and with catechumen because there's an excitement. And I'm not selling anything, right? You know, it can't be that kind of thing. And when you let go of that, you can really enjoy it. But at the same time that we're learning about doctrine, about the services, about the nature of our life in Christ, the struggle of the world, God's desire for us, all of this kind of stuff. We're also building these habits of prayer, of honesty, of accountability. And so that when that excitement goes down, the life is there. And there's a maturity that allows them to be a part of it and soak it in. Now, it is something that needs to be on the radar, that people are going to go through this. And I know people, especially men, who as that goes down, they look for more to add. Because they assign the excitement as I was learning new things, now I need to learn more. Or the excitement came from my looking forward to this sacrament, so therefore I need to look forward to the next one. And this is why there's a canon against ordaining neophytes. Because someone who they're in this dynamic, and it's an unhealthy dynamic. It can be pointed in a healthy way, but on its own it can be unhealthy. Because it's almost an addiction to this level of excitement in Christ. And that's how, so we don't just have an idea of grace, right? We have a participation in grace. And someone can mistake this emotion of excitement for grace. And they'll say, what happened to the grace in my life? And then they go on the path to ordination. And this will feed this excitement of expectation. Well, come to find out, if you make it through there and you get ordained, come to find out you're still a flawed person working with other flawed people. And the excitement is going to decrease, right? And I know people who go from thing to thing, trying to regenerate that excitement. And there are plenty of things to do it, especially now that we have so many communities and experiences available to us online. So, here's another exciting thing. Here's this way of doing orthodoxy. Oh, yeah, this. And what they're doing is they're scratching an itch that they should just learn to ignore. Because there are better ways to satisfy the human yearning for perfection than going from one shiny thing to another, even when it's a church, scare quotes, church or theological thing. And this is why some of our most, most seemingly committed, enthusiastic Orthodox converts and reverts get involved with more and more extreme sorts of sub-communities, right? And it's not healthy. And for some of them, it's not enough. It can't be enough. And so, in fact, orthodoxy has only been one part of a life journey of moving from thing to thing that they mistake as continual enlightenment, but really is just an unwillingness to commit, to grow where you are, to deepen roots. And that's what we really need to do in orthodoxy, is deepen our roots, not be like that tumbleweed that rolls around with the winds of culture wars or whatever it is that's motivating someone. And I'm most familiar with this, by the way, among conservatives, because those are the people that, I know in church life, And, let's face it, do the math. I'm a retired Army officer. I grew up in the South. I've got 4 kids. I married when I was young. Do the math. But it happens on the right and the left, so to speak. I'm putting quotes up again. People, because those are some of the sub communities that are attractive and seem to allow for this protectual growth from one shiny thing to another. They get attached to political causes. And we've seen that over the last, few years, about how commitment to political orthodox causes within political causes by Orthodox, expressed in Orthodox words, is one of these new shinies. That's my hypothesis. I could be wrong. Maybe one side is actually righteous. I'm laughing because I can't even say that without smiling. There's righteousness in each side, but no, the overall, it's not a healthy thing to do. And when we engage in unhealthy behavior, there are consequences. There are consequences to our community, and there are consequences to our hearts. And doubling down isn't gonna work. It scratches that itch of continual improvement, continual challenge. For people who are wired for this kind of ascetic battle, right? It engages it really well. Culture wars do, but it's not a healthy way to do it. Seek first the kingdom of God, and these things will be added, right? What we can do is we can end up doing that backwards. Like, think of how many saints, and if you're not familiar with the stories of saints, read the prologue every day. Make their experiences part of your experience, right? It's not just data points. It's the way that we develop the mind, right? How many of them would just disappear for a while before they did any public ministry? St. Paul, for example. He knew things. He knew things from study. He knew things from revelation. So we're doing it wrong, right? But it's very exciting to be part of this process with catechumen, just like it is working with couples that are getting ready to get married, right? And it's also, anytime you're counseling, you have to be careful. Don't mess with people more than they can bear it, right? Instead, encourage them to understand themselves and how relationships work in each other, so that they will work it out among themselves, right? You're hoping to see each other, that they will see each other as people that can be trusted, so that they can engage in honest conversation, so they can build up those habits together, not just trying to please the other so that they don't have to live a life alone, or whatever kind of baggage is informing their life choices from earlier experiences. The neat thing about helping catechumen is that one side of this relationship is pure and healthy. That the relationship with God in orthodoxy, God as taught and experienced within prayer, within liturgy, within the services, is just completely safe. That's the kind of honest openness communication, soul bearing that can be done. Yeah, so Deacon Adrian, he asks what I think the biggest challenge is for new couples in today's society. Oh man, that's huge. There's so many. But for all of them, let me tell you this though, for all of them, the solution is to love well and giving our lives to Christ, right, so that we can learn to love, just period. Love ourselves, be comfortable with ourselves so that we can love another. And when I say comfortable with ourselves, I don't mean comfortable with our sin, but I also don't mean to walk around as shame buckets, right? Because then we can become codependent with people, and that's unhealthy. So I think that, Deacon, that we have a diminished capacity to honestly love. And that's tough, because look at what we've been given as alternatives to relationship. If our understanding of relationship is defined by, as what we're doing online, whether it's a texting relationship or our online communities, our gaming communities, those have real components, but they diminish the capacity for this kind of open vulnerability. Okay, because think of it. I mean, it's perfect. You're mediating the experience. You can shut it off anytime you want. You can mediate your response, right? So that, you can always keep that part of you that hidden from the other. So I think, I don't know what our capacity is for being connected to someone is right now. And of course, throw in pornography, right, which for so many men has distorted their idea, and I could use the word image, but it's deeper than that. Their understanding and experience of relationship with a woman, right? It's weird. And it's not just, if you read the psychology on it, it's not just that it changes the expectations, the sexual expectations. It's much more, right? Anytime you objectify in that way, and then, pleasure, which is a part of it, becomes the goal, whether it's pleasing the self or the other. I mean, that's part of the experience, but it's objectified. So there's no relational component. And to the extent that we define a relationship, read one article about how people, they develop relationships with these people, but it's not real. It's felt, but there's none of this vulnerability. There's none of this give and take. And so, but there is the experience of pleasure, so it's rewarded. And so then you get into a relationship with a real person, and you can adjust sexual expectations, I'm sure. But the capacity for connection has been so stunted that it's going to take time. If that were there, if that connection was there, at the deep fundamental level, that shared life level, then these other things that make the world so difficult for couples right now, the economic challenges, the social challenges, the fact that committed marriage is not something that is assumed anymore. So even a ring no longer provides a symbol of chastity and a desire for chastity, right? Those can be endured much easier. So I certainly think that's part of it. And a healthy church community would provide many of the reinforcers. You would be able to see, for example, how the priest and the priest's wife relate to one another, how the couples in that church relate to one another. You would have relationships with older men and older women who can share with you enough wisdom for you to grow to the next step, right? I don't know how often that happens nowadays, because again, I don't know how capable people are right now for doing connection, for doing relationship, because what it would require to have that, for two men to have that kind of conversation, there'd have to be the capacity for trust and being trustworthy, and that's a muscle that has to be developed, and that's a lament. So whereas other people might focus on, 2 generations ago, they might have focused on, the romanticism of Disney, this idea of perfect relationships and what they look like and how it's silly and it's not real. I'll focus on something deeper. Yeah. We need to grow our capacity to do relationship through friendships, through parish. And then when someone from that kind of a community falls in love, then they have the ability already to do friendship, to do connection well, to do honesty well, to be trusted, and to trust, to be trustworthy, and to know how to relate to someone who is trustworthy. They'll be able to take it to the next level, because that's what marriage is. Marriage, because of the habits of the home, and because of its fittedness, it allows for that to be taken to the next level, and then that is taken back into the community as leaven. And I'm not saying that in our society we are sorry about that. We are not trustworthy, or that we don't trust people. It's just that it's not deep. And you can think about your relationship with your confessor. Many of us don't have a relationship with a confessor because we've been hurt by authority before. That's our excuse. Because the person available to confess us is not the kind of person that we can trust. Okay? Maybe that priest lives in the same world that you do, and so it's hard for him to trust, and he hasn't really learned how to be trustworthy. But in relationship with you, he can become that. You shouldn't have to be the one growing your priest, though. The church should take care of that. Hold on just a second. One of the challenges of a morning show, I haven't got the froggy out of my throat. So does that make sense, Deacon? And I would ask you, what would you say? Man, you engage with people. And one of the things that you're doing is you're seeing families under stress, under incredible stress when their kids are going through cancer, right? So I would imagine that you see these couples at their best, and also at the times when they're being tested, they're being tempted the most away from their true selves. And, one of the things that you do as a chaplain is you provide that moment of just grace, of acceptance. It's like, it's one of the toughest things to do as a priest is funerals. Funerals are tough, and they're not just tough because of the obvious things. If you've been through one side of the funeral, right? Not the dead side yet, thank God, but the side of the griever, the grieving, right? On the priest side, think of the other things that he does: getting people ready for first confession, getting people ready for chrismation, baptism, right? There's a process. You're working with them. You're identifying these things that should be adjusted so that there can be a better understanding of what has happened. There's none of that for a funeral. It's just thrown at you. You've got people under stress, and the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. That conversation about grief, about love, about connection, about the seeming sundering of that connection through death. All of this would have been done before. And you get people that are being tempted away from their best selves by grief, and many of them are unchurched, so they don't have any, it's hard to communicate. And and the last thing that you do then is try to give them the whole package about, it's just the whole package of theology, right? And for you, Deacon Adrian, Chaplain Adrian. I can't even imagine, right? I mean, I've done hospital work. I did a year of internship, right? And I've certainly, done it as a priest, but it's different as a priest. You already have a relationship when you go in as a priest. As a chaplain, it takes time, right? So, yeah. So any word that you can offer in the chat, what is it that you've seen to be most effective in those moments, right? Do you share with them? So for me, I think as a chaplain, it's that witness of presence, and your joyfulness, your quickness to connect with people, your trustworthiness. It is, and don't get the big head on this, but the way that the mechanism works is if you acquire the Holy Spirit, then myriads around you will be saved, right? If we bring this spirit of peace, trustworthiness, connection, that is graceful, then the words, you don't have to come up with a perfect formula, right? What's the perfect psalm for this? No. People will hear the perfect psalm no matter what you say, if they love you. Yeah, so. But it is a tough time. It's hard to do relationship right now. And we're seeing the fruit of this, right? We're seeing the fruit of this. And we can celebrate the fact that my understanding based on the survey data is that there are fewer hookups now going on in high school than there used to be. Okay, that's something good. And be charitable when I say this, right? Hear this in charity. Unless it's also the case that they are disengaging from fellowship with each other altogether, right? So it's good that there are fewer superficial hookups, but does it mean that connections have become even more superficial altogether, right? And, the phenomenon of, just people see unhealthy relationship. The ubiquity of porn does this, right? So, we have people who don't want to embrace their sexuality. Why would you? It's a way that, manipulation occurs, domination occurs. It's a way, it's incredibly unhealthy. Why would you? Yeah. So, it's tough. We've got to do relationship better. And, we're not going to fix that tomorrow, but we can help fix it starting today. We can have the proper mind, the proper, ordered mind, nous, intellect, gut. And then we can build good marriages and good parish communities, recognizing that that's always a work in progress, and that anytime you try to improve something, you're going to get pushback. And that pushback is part of relationship. It's not to be condemned. That's when you reach out. That's when you learn how to communicate, is when you've started to make a change and it starts to go south. That's when you, man. And it's so beautiful to take people through that process. I've done it. And it wasn't me. It was grace that led us through some very difficult times in the communities that I've served. So Deacon Adrian says, yes, the loss of a child seems to lead a lot of married people to getting divorced. And I encourage them that being together is the most important time of their life, from day one, with prayer and supporting. Yeah, statistically, that's true, and the loss of a child. And you can see the reasons for that. Just, oh my goodness, I can never trust again. One other is the way they should walk through this dark time. I always say we are a team, all of us in the hospital with different talents. I say the grace of God is unconditional. Yeah. For married couples, you can't let anything come between you. And you're so hurt with the death of a child that any kind of miscommunication can be exaggerated, and again can be turned into a polarizing event, right? Where one of them is is in a different place in that grief journey and offers a word of encouragement that is not heard well, that is not heard in charity, maybe not have been offered from a well-considered, mind. And so it becomes an excuse for, division. And there is something about that temptation of despondency that becomes like a forbidden, a taste of some kind of forbidden food, where, the loneliness becomes kind of an addictive thing. And so the idea of letting someone into that, even a spouse, is just no, because maybe it's because the ego, the pride, is trying to protect itself from further harm. Whatever it is, it's something that that Christ came to heal us from. And the way that Christ operates in the world is through his people, through chaplains like Deacon Adrian, through spouses with their gentle and constant care of one another, and for the willingness to take everything, even in times of stress, in the way that they were intended, rather than in the worst possible way. I forget who it is. The comedian says, he says to his wife, "Look, if there's a good way and a bad way to interpret what I said, please pick the good way," right? And that's natural when times are easy, perhaps. But if it's a habit, even in those difficult times, what people will hear is what was intended or what should have been intended. That's how deep the charity goes towards the one that you love, right? Because, man, if you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, who shall stand? If your mind is set on finding excuses to be alone or excuses to divide, then you're going to find them. We've got big brains. That's what they do. So having this kind of unconditional love that the Lord offers us, having that kind of love for one another. We've talked before, it was in the confession show this past Tuesday, that the Lord isn't looking for excuses to keep you out of his family. He's providing every opportunity to bring you in. And that's the way we are to behave towards each other. Not by lowering standards, by the way, but being pastors to one another. And when someone offers you, as the prayer of St. Simeon says, a portion of a tear rather than full tears, that portion of a tear means that there's a willingness to connect at some level, metaphorically. So take advantage of that. Move in there. Don't look at the deficit of tears as proof that the connection is not fitting. That's not how pastoring works. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, who shall stand? If you want to find ways to keep people from experiencing what you experience with your life in Christ, you will. You will. And that's the danger of online orthodoxy right now, is it is full of that, both on the so-called left and on the so-called right, and even on the so-called middle, right? Excuses to define the lack of tears as a lack of seriousness, right? Rather than seeing the portion of the tear. And in this case, the portion of the tear, the thing that drew that person to that subculture was not what you see. It wasn't the way it's being described. In the case of, Southern Orthodoxy, that made public orthodoxy this week. The embrace of Southern Orthodoxy is not about an embrace of racism. It's not an embrace of lost causism. There's something else going on there. The portion of the tear is different from that. And if you look and you say, yes, but it's missing all these things, and I have license to attack. Yes, if you, O brother, should mark iniquities, who should stand? Congratulations. With the Lord there is forgiveness, but you know a better way. Look for the good in these things so that you can make a connection, so that you can gain a brother, right? instead of making an excuse to sunder relationships with people with whom you have everything important in common. And y'all, that's wearing me out. The way people are looking for excuses to hate their brother, to hate their sister, is wearing me out. The drama. we like to joke, we have a rhythm of the house here in the Perkins household. And look, my culture, that informed me, the kind of home culture, the community culture that informed me, was really a Southern culture. It's, if you're going to stereotype, it's more of that Northern New England, culture, where drama's not welcomed in a house. There are other cultures where it's part of it, and that's cool too. Both can exist at a healthy equilibrium. But we don't allow drama, we allow discussion, and we value discussion. But you don't get extra credit by tying your emotions to it, right? It's not like the trump card if you start crying or if you start, being unreasonable. That's what we're doing though. And that's why I'm not on Facebook. I don't want to bring that drama into my home. Why would I? You guys are being crazy on Facebook. You're finding excuses to hate everybody except your own team. There's only one team. There is no longer Greek nor Jew, right? And you don't get to decide who is a part of that family based on your "who, O Lord, should mark iniquities." Congratulations. We're turning into a bunch of Pharisees. And I don't like it. I honestly, I can't stand it. It's, and I can use theological words and say it's unchristian, but the fact is it's probably just a visceral reaction. It's my gut saying, man, this is drama. I don't need this kind of drama. Can't we have a little bit of calm? If you're gonna be dramatic, at least lead in by saying, man, I sure do value you and your all you do for the church, and then you can say, but I disagree with you on this, this, and this. We skip that step, and that allows people to say, that's right. See, Penny hears it. There's only one drama that we've allowed to live in our house, and that's a little dog. That little dog knows nothing but drama. Everything is an excuse. Everything is an excuse to be dramatic. And that's what we're like on Facebook. Just a bunch of little dogs yapping at each other. Yep, 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 yep. And then we dress it up with theological language so it doesn't sound like bark. It's because it's quoting the fathers. But it's still the clanging of cymbals. It's still the yapping of little dogs. Tired of it. I'm tired of it. I don't want any more yapping. Nothing I can do about that little dog. And there's something I can do about you. I can love you. So, you want to know what's going on right now in the house? You want to know what's the craziness that has the little dog going crazy? I bet you one of the kids is coming. Their rooms are upstairs. Somebody's coming down. And this is how the dogs greet them. That's their love language. Maybe that's what I need to do. Yeah, George, sorry, I was being superficial. George says, this losing a child both exposes strengths and weaknesses in a relationship. If a couple is not together, it shows a disparity of perspective, and it becomes easy to miss God in the experience. Yeah, exactly. It really is. And man, you can't give up that teammate. Yeah, Adrian says, yeah, your dogs are sensing non-Orthodox people. Yeah, we've got heresy detectors. That's what our dogs are. It's the mailman. He's a Baptist. Yeah, it's, and the time to plant a tree as 20 years ago. So if you want to have the kind of constitution that is resilient, that can withstand whatever, unemployment, dislocation, underemployment, divorce, any of these things, start now, right? To build the kind of mind, because that's the same kind of mind that has joy in everything. So it deepens your experience of life in a beautiful way, and it allows you, when these shocks come, to deal with them, more so with a marriage. If you take the time, you immerse yourself in the rhythms of Orthodox life. If you intentionally foster rhythms within your household, these rhythms of communication, mutual forgiveness, honesty, allowing someone to be honest and hearing them and not judging, just listening to them, because you love them for a reason. Then, when these terrible things happen, it's not going to make them easy, right? But it'll make them survivable. Because what happens when people who are not resilient, they're not part of a resilient community, a resilient marriage, when something like this comes along, they die. They die inside. And you can understand why. It's a defense mechanism. Because love has betrayed them. If you've done the work, then you know that there is no betrayal. And there is no loss of connection. This is not something that you can convince people of when they're going through grief. That there is no loss of connection through grace. Because love connects all. There is no church of the living and church of the dead. Right? Death is not an ontological thing. It has been defeated by Christ. You can't learn that when everything's fallen apart. Right? We can help you rebuild it afterwards. Right? Christ came to bring the dead back to life. But man, how much better not to go through that. Right? How much better. Grief on its own is hard enough. Oh, Lord have mercy. Grief is hard enough on its own without compounding it with all of these other things, some of which just aren't true or necessary. So foster those relationships with people. If you're not, if your marriage, watch how your marriage did over the last couple of years. How did it handle all the stresses that COVID and politics threw at it? How did it do? Right? Was it, the part of the ark that took you through the chaos of the waters? Right? Or was it part of the storm? If it was part of the storm, you got work to do. Right? And our temptation is to start with the other. Well, they. It's easy for us to see the mote in someone else's eye. This is psychological. This is just pure good psychology that Christ was sharing with us. It's to try and start manipulating the other so that they will become someone that you can trust. Right? Start with yourself. Become someone that other people can trust. Learn to listen. And then you'll probably find that other person really was trustworthy. They're just broken. Right? So build that up, right? Because I can tell you, having gone through very difficult storms with a marriage that was superficially healthy but had not been tested, right? And had not grown those deep roots, right? So we were part of the storm for each other. And then getting more intentional about it. Now, I'm not saying that, stress makes me happy, but knowing that I have a partner that always has my back, I have a pastor that I live with that knows me better than I know myself and has every desire to bring the Christ's healing grace into my life. Yeah, that brings me joy. That brings me joy, even in dislocation, underemployment, all these other things. Yeah, joyful. Yeah. The saints have it so strong that when they're being, tortured with loneliness, they're being tortured with physical pain, with sickness, all these things, that they can still proclaim love so strongly that those around them are brought to a desire for that same experience of life, right? Be that for the people in your life. Be that kind of peaceful, centered, stable, generous person that they can trust. Because knowing that there is such a thing as trust, this is a huge revelation to people, that they can be honest with somebody and not be judged, manipulated, and that it leads to a deepening of their life. This is a game changer. It's a game changer. It really is. Be that kind of person for the people in your life and allow others to grow into that role in your own. So, going back to Deacon Adrian's question, the biggest problem for marriage nowadays is that we don't, this is not a natural capacity for us. I don't know if it ever was, I can imagine. Certainly in Eden, this was how the desire was that we would grow into this, right? And in Christ it's possible now, despite the fact that, many things in the world are now lined up against us. Yeah. See, that's what the dogs were barking at, is my second son, Warren, he had the nerve to come downstairs and get himself some breakfast. Now he's going to volunteer at the animal shelter. Isn't that cute? You know why he's doing it, right? I mean, yes, he loves animals. Yes, he has a good heart. All these things. But you know who he's going with, right? His girlfriend. Yeah. So already, this fittedness is helping my son become a better person. And so this is how it can work. So I'm going to take the example of him. Don't tell him, right? But he's 18 years old. So the odds are against this relationship. But we encourage them to spend as much time here at our house as possible. So it's often the case that his girlfriend will have dinner with us. And we'll see how communication works, right? How, what home can feel like, right? And, and also our son, we are trying to train them to do relationship well with friends, with spouses in the future, Lord willing, with monastics, if that happens to be their way, whatever it is. We're trying to just, in the normal course of things, allow them to see how connection works and develop connections with them. Now, as a parent, it's a different sort of thing. It's like being a teacher. You are vulnerable to, it's because it's not equal. You have to be so much more careful, right? Because they are not your pastor, and expecting them to be your pastor and to have that kind of relationship with you, it can create really unreasonable sorts of demands on them and incredible codependencies. You see it in parents who have done that to their children. They make the children believe that their happiness depends on what their children do. Right? No, that's not what this is about. Right? So they get to see how a horizontal thing looks like because of the way that I relate to my wife and to the adults that we bring in, like my oldest son. Right? But the relationship between us is not that way. It's a beautiful thing, and it gets changed, renegotiated, if you will, as they get older. So it looks different with my 16-year-old daughter than it does with my 10-year-old daughter, than with my 18-year-old son, and then with my 25-year-old son. Right? But we can build families, we can build parishes, we can build friendships that are a a straightening of the crooked way that will grow out from there, right? So the answer to the drama and the polarization is not by coming up with a better political party. It's not like David Brooks wrote this week, leaving. He says, I'm sick of the drama on the right. I'm now putting myself in the middle as a moderate Democrat. Okay, whatever floats your boat, dude. That's not the answer. Finding the right political party, not the answer. This kind of daily sanity, fostering of healthy relationships, building the capacity for trust, both within yourself, which means learning humility, right? Taking your ego out of relationship with others so that there can be honest love, a love without manipulation, without any kind of addictive quality, right? Where it's just pure connection. The world changes when you're part of those kinds of networks. And this is, it's modeled one in Trinity, right? The fact that it is God who made the world, and through him all things were made, and the Logos, right? This is how we participated in it most fully, is in the way that we serve one another and the way we relate to him. We worship him, right? Love your God, love your neighbor, right? These vertical, these horizontal connections. This is how it's done. All right, so that's our hour. I had a talk that I was ready to share with you about COVID, social media, and the sorting of American Orthodoxy by ideology. But we'll get to that some other time. It really was great spending the morning with you. George, Deacon Adrian, so great I miss you guys. I miss y'all. And, and y'all are Yankees. See, this can work. All right, God bless y'all. God bless all of you who are watching this. And until next time, Godspeed.